Sweet. Okay, thank you. So we'll do a quick agenda. First, we'll go through a welcome. We'll talk about some events past and upcoming. We'll do a quick get to know a member. And then we've got two really great presenters today. We've got one that's a little bit more about just kind of Tableau journey, how she's gone from beginner to a Tableau public ambassador. And then Megan stepped up, as I'm sure you guys saw. Luke Stanke is not presenting this time. He had a family emergency, but he will be presenting next time. So definitely please show up again for that one. But super excited to have Megan's course. I have seen this presentation before, and it is very lit, very good. Hello, welcome, come on in. We're just getting started, so feel free to grab some refreshments if you'd like. Otherwise, we're just gonna hop into the agenda. And real quick, just wanna say hi, I'm Katrina, if we haven't met yet. The best place to find me is basically on Twitter. I'm at Data Katrina. You could find me at Data Katrina, basically everything that's social related. Otherwise, if you want to chat, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. All my information is also at the bottom of the page for the sign up. So wanted to highlight some upcoming events. As you can see, our slide is a little sparse this time as the holidays are getting started. Things are kind of slowing down, but we do want to highlight some events coming up in December. This first one, the Tableau Community Booster event, the All Tug event, is something that my coworker and I, Will Strauss, are putting together, which I'm super excited about. The objective of this meeting is to kind of just hype up and let folks know about other tugs that are available. With COVID, there's just been this explosion of opportunities for people to learn and connect to other Tableau users through different industries or different groups. Hello. And we want to be able to just kind of promote and share with people. So that event is going to have 3 speakers that are talking about some tugs that they have started. There's one with it's like a veterans tug. There's another LGBTQ plus one, and a third one, which I believe is healthcare. So again, the objective of this tug is to basically just say, hey, whoever you are, whatever you're passionate about, there is a tug for you. There's other people out there who are doing data things like you want to do. So that is Friday, December 2nd, 11:30 to 1:30 Central. It is a virtual event. We'll do a short presentation and then a Remo event. Which is basically just breakout rooms, networking. It's super fun, very flexible, come and go as you please. If you can only show up for half an hour, please still show up. If you can only show up for the last half hour, please still show up. We're happy to have you. I'm not sure. Oh, sorry about that. Let me try again. All right, sorry everyone. Well, let me go back and just again, here's our slide. Now hopefully you can see it better. But the next event I want to call out is She Talks Data. This is an event run by Serena, who also helps plan this tug. She's really a great person just to get to know. She Talks Data is a women's focused analytics community. We talk about anything and everything related to analytics or just women in business, women like in general. Guys, you are welcome to show up, but attendance does take preference for women, and you do need to register for this event. It is in person at Lila, which is a great restaurant. So definitely check that one out as well. And then the next Twin Cities Tug is going to be Thursday, December 8th. And so that is the one that Luke Stanke will be speaking at. So again, can't make it today, but please show up to that one as well. It's also going to be great. And that one will be a hybrid meeting. So again, virtual and in person at West End Plaza in St. Louis Park. And then just as a note, kind of after this tug, the Twin Cities Tug will kind of like move to virtual only for, I believe it's 2 months. Again, no one wants to go outside in January and February, so let's diminish that as needed, and we'll just hang out with everyone online. So, and real quick, sorry, I forgot to mention this, but for registering for these events, the community booster one is not quite available yet. We had a little technical issue with the Remo event, so that one will be coming soon. We'll post the link. Don't worry about it. You can find out more later. She Talks Data is on meetup.com, which if you haven't checked out meetup.com as well, like there's lots of great events going on in the analytics community. So definitely recommend checking that one out. And then TCTUG, I hope you know how to do it because you're here. So I would assume that you know how to register for that one. It's the same spot. So, and then I also wanted to talk about mini analytics. So for anyone who doesn't know what this is, mini analytics is an analytics focused event or organization within the Twin Cities or the Minneapolis area. On Monday, they had an event that was Women in Data, and Women in Data Analytics, Data Science, I believe they had a nice little acronym for it. So this was a super fun event. And I just wanted to hear if anyone else here or online attended and if they had any highlights from this event or any cool things that they learned or what they loved about it. So if you're online and want to share, just unmute yourself. Otherwise, anyone in the room? All right, well, I will share my highlights then. My first highlight was, again, Serena gave a presentation about data culture, which was really cool because she's awesome. And two, it was a really good presentation to talk about how like data culture is this like idea that everyone has, and this is buzzword, and people are like, I should be doing this. I went to a seminar and they told me I should have a data culture. What is that? And so she gave a lot of really good practical like tips and kind of just myth busting ish kind of stuff about it. And I know if you don't follow or aren't connected with Serena on LinkedIn, definitely connect with her. She did post an ebook that was kind of like a ebook version of her presentation. So definitely check that out. And then I also wanted to highlight this other presentation on the left was someone from Mayo Clinic who was talking, and it was about breast cancer research. And I was just like, whoosh, way over my head. Everything went way over. But I remember sitting there and just thinking about how awesome it is to have so many smart, intelligent women working and striving towards creating a better world. And then the third one that I wanted to highlight was kind of a piggyback off of that was someone was giving a presentation about sustainability in retail. They were from Nordstrom. I'm kind of blanking on her name, so sorry if you're attending or know her. But it was a really good presentation because she talked about how, hey, even if you aren't doing cancer research, you can still make a positive impact in the world through different efforts like sustainability or, talking about like reducing carbon footprint, all of that kind of fun stuff. So there is still hope, even if you don't work at a nonprofit or are researching cancer. And she was just trying to iterate or emphasize the fact that there is a spot and a place for everyone in analytics. There's so many different career paths available. So anything that you are passionate about, there's a spot for you in analytics. So just wanted to highlight that. So next we're going to do get to know a member, and surprise, I did change these questions. So if you have been here before, we got new ones. So I would really love it if we could have someone from in the room come up here and do get to know a member, and we will bribe you with Tableau swag. And then also if someone online would like to unmute themselves and share, love to hear that, let us know. And I'll let Jim, if you could take down their name, and we'll get you some swag or something as well. So, anyone in the room want to volunteer? Yeah, come on up.
Yeah, so my name is Menth. I work as a data analyst with Wells Fargo. I have a few members from my team as well come here. What are some common questions we answer with Tableau? So from our day-to-day, we are like a central team. So we get questions from all across, from HR, sales, marketing, whatever department has any data questions, they would come to us. How comfortable are you with Tableau? I've been using Tableau for the past 7 years. I definitely love it, the ease of it and the ability to explain it to the end users for sure. What do you enjoy about Tableau? I think every day as a team, I think we learn from each other and something new each day, that new feature or something that is useful for within our team, we kind of get to know about it. It's just, when I first started in Tableau or analytics space, I didn't have any background of it. I started with a startup company, so it was fairly challenging in some ways, but also interesting to grow into that space. I actually started on the server side of it. I wish I knew more on the visualization side of it, starting up, but now that I'm in this space, I do enjoy just solving data problems day to day.
Yeah, awesome, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. I also kind of started with a trial by fire learning Tableau, so I enjoy how easy it is to learn as well. Okay, is there anyone online who'd like to volunteer and let us get to know you? Oops. Word. If not, we can also have someone else from the room join or talk again if you'd like. Yeah,
I
come
can
on up.
introduce myself if you can hear me.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
we'll get all of you. Come on, or Michael.
I'm Michael. I used to be a Tableau server admin. Now I'm in a data analytics role and we have a new admin. I work at Fulton County Government, and many of our dashboards that we provide for open access and transparency for the government, and validating that different vendors are doing the right thing, we primarily use Tableau for, and R and stuff. So something I wish I knew in Tableau is how to make better dashboards, and then resources to teach Tableau for. Those are two things I've always looked for, like better visually dashboards and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Struggling with making good data visualizations is always difficult, and sometimes it is a trial by error. You just gotta work on it. But there's also a lot of good principles out there that you can apply and learn. But sometimes it gets tricky to be like, oh, well, it's super easy in Superstore data where it's like providing, it's retail, it's clean, it's easy, it's time series, blah, blah, blah. How do I take those principles and then apply it to something else? So yeah, definitely very, very difficult. But thank you, Michael, for sharing. Would you like to come up as well?
Hi, my name is Rich. I also work at Wells Fargo. My name is Rich. I work at Wells Fargo. That's right there too. My role is analytic consultant. So people come to me with projects and try to find solutions. The work I do right now, most often with Tableau, is updating and improving existing reports. So I'm trying to understand other people's work. I'm not very comfortable with it. I've been using Tableau for about 3 months. I don't enjoy very much about it. I find it extremely difficult to use. I find it hard to see the data I'm manipulating. I find it hard to go back and understand what someone else has done, like to find the joins they did. That's the current struggle I'm doing. And what's something that I wish I knew? Well, I wish I knew how to do the things I'm supposed to be doing. So, right. So I guess as a newbie, and sometimes it's useful and easy, and other times it is not at all intuitive.
Yeah, definitely.
Good.
Well, glad you're here. So we can
Yes.
help you learn how to do things in
like
addition to your folders. If you would like to add some swag. Thank you for sharing. I think with that, if we want to hop in to our first presentation. Stop sharing. Lisa, if you want to go for it.
Perfect. Let me hop off mute and get the sharing going. Screen 2. Perfect. All right, do you guys have that?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. And also me?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk today. I'm really excited to talk about this pretty personal topic that is really exciting to me, and hopefully my goal is also inspiring to you. My name is Elisa Davis. I am currently a lead business intelligence analyst for Discover Financial Services. And I am now a Tableau public ambassador. A year ago, neither of these things was true. So I'm going to take you on a little journey through my Tableau story. Haha. So I've already kind of skipped to the punchline here. This is the Tableau Public Ambassador announcement slide. I took a snapshot because I was so excited when this came out. Here's me right here. I've got a flag down here on Kevin Wee because this is my buddy who works at Discover, and making friends with him through the Tableau community is how I found out that my current role was available. So, and to be completely transparent, I'm recycling some of these slides from a talk that I gave to the Discover internal TUG. So I was calling out some people who might recognize him. So a year ago, I guess a year ago, I was just getting started at this point, but a year and a half ago, my Tableau public page was pretty much completely blank. I started my Tableau public journey before that, but really when I joined Tableau public was when things took off. So rewind all the way back to 2018. I first started using Tableau Desktop 1 in a role where I was supporting fundraising analytics in higher education. I'd been in the job about 2 years. I was pretty bored. My job was to turn an ancient database into a giant spreadsheet that fundraisers who are inherently people would never actually want to look at, and try to get them out the door to have the conversations that lead to generous support for students at the University of Nevada, Reno. And I heard, oh, you're getting Tableau. So one day the IT guys came by and they installed Tableau on my computer, and it was this, you know, like little sparkle icon. I double clicked on it, it opened up, and I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? You know, I think as some of you shared, your first exposure to Tableau, it doesn't feel intuitive. I was coming from a mathematical background, sure, but not a data background. So it was like, connect to a data source. And I was like, how the heck am I supposed to do that? And so it was pretty confusing, but I could sense that it was also really powerful. So I cashed in all of my favor chips and basically didn't stop talking about it until I got my team to send me. Actually, the whole team ended up going. All three of us went to San Francisco and went to the Tableau Desktop 1 training offered by Tableau. And it was fantastic. You don't have to go to an in-person training to learn Tableau. And there are tons of people in the community who have taught themselves, or, you know, like access to series of YouTube videos, like really made it out. But for me, I like structure. I like support and accountability. This will come up again. So I knew that the in-person experience with my team was going to be the best way to learn. I got back and started a reporting revolution. They didn't really realize what they were signing up for when they sent my team to Tableau. We weren't just going to use it to make reports, but we were really going to start asking design questions about how does this work and why do we do it this way? That went well enough that they sent us back to Desktop 2. So this is a picture of me the weekend that the magic all started. And you can only kind of tell if you know what you're looking at there, but I'm about 5 months pregnant. So I joke that my kid and my Tableau career are about the same age, and it makes it easy to remember how long I've been doing this. So the next couple of years, I spent getting to know the internal data system, getting to know how to work with data, getting to sort of learn the ins and outs of the politics of kind of rebuilding a data system and a reporting system. Who cares about what? How do you get things done? What's the balance between, you know, aesthetics and functionality? What makes sense in your head and what makes sense like sort of to you when you put it together, and how much more context you have to add in so that you can stop answering the same 5 questions every time somebody new looks at your dashboard. Great learning. In 2019 or 2020, I went to the Tableau conference, so I was exposed to the concepts of data fam and Tableau public and Twitter. And my Twitter account is exactly as old as that first conference because I sat next to somebody who was like, oh, all of the data people are on Twitter. You should tweet. And I was like, sitting here waiting for this to start. I think I can sign up for this on my phone. Didn't do anything with it. Same thing. Like I signed up for a Tableau public account. I looked at a Makeover Monday data set and I was like, I got my hands full figuring out what I need to do in my current position. Like I've still got plenty of challenges internally here. I feel like I should do Tableau public. I feel like I should do Twitter, but it's just like it wasn't the right time at that point. So fast forward a couple of years, we got some great wins with our reporting stuff. And then we hit sort of the great migration coming out of lockdown. And it was really clear to me that I'd done as much as I could in my current role. I knew that Tableau was my favorite part of my current role. And in the reorganization, those responsibilities actually came off of my plate. So I didn't have Tableau at work anymore. And I knew that I wanted it to be a pretty big piece of whatever my next role was going to be. So I finally had the reason and the motivation and the excitement to start building my Tableau public portfolio. And it was right after Labor Day weekend when I was sitting down, like committing to myself that I was going to build a portfolio and make friends and make connections and find my next role. And that's what happened. The long story short is that the stars aligned and I saw a last minute announcement for Chantilly Jaggernoth's Millennials in Data Analyst Bootcamp starting up. And it's a fantastic experience. It was about 16 weeks. And the selling point for me was, one, Chantilly is amazing. If you're looking at sort of like, how do I balance making my dashboards look good with how do I cram a lot of really great information in there? I think she's given this talk several times and there's probably a recording out there. Look for Chantilly Jaggernoth and Design Secrets for the Non-Designer. It's a really good overview of how she even uses wireframing and sort of like standard sets of layouts to produce almost every visual that she puts out. But she made us turn in our homework on Tableau Public. So I knew that by the end of this course, which, like I'd committed to, I was gonna have at least 8 vizzes and hopefully I would have built like a vizzing habit. I didn't really anticipate how fun it was going to be. Like you hung out with a bunch of other nerds. It was every other week for a couple of hours in the evening. And we started by looking at everybody else's, take on the prompt for the week. And it really impressed me how differently different people can interpret the same data. It was similar to Superstore data in that it was really clean. But it was all different types of data. And so that was phenomenal experience. Like I had a lot of experience working with fundraising tables, which like they have nuance to them. They're pretty complicated because, you've got one constituent, but then they have a spouse who might or might not be involved. And you've got the fundraiser who goes and talks to them, but maybe there's multiple fundraisers who go and talk to them. And then there's multiple proposals that get put out. And sometimes the amounts change and the amounts might or might not match the checks that have come in. So like data complexity, I was fine with, but just like my one specific flavor, right? And we built a lot of real world fake data style dashboards in Millennials in Data. And we turned them in every other week. And you were going to have to show up in class every other week. So it was also good practice of like, doing this in the evening on top of a full-time job, on top of your family commitments. It really taught me that the benefit of like if you're going to do this work and put yourself out there, you've got to time box it and you've got to be okay with it not being perfect when it goes. Just like I was chatting about with some other people at the gym this morning, it matters that you show up consistently, much more than any individual day. So the community, the feedback, Chantilly, in addition to being massively talented, is also hilarious to hang out with, and the habit. So the timing was perfect in terms of Millennials in Data wrapping up when Makeover Monday was on a long hiatus. So there was this explosion of community-led Tableau public projects. Oh, and the other thing that happened in Millennials in Data is in one of our last Q&A sessions, I was like, she was kind of hosting an Ask Me Anything. I was like, Chantilly, do we have to Twitter? And she was like, well, yeah, I mean, kind of. Like, if you want to build connections, that's where people hang out. So my approach to Twitter previously was that it was for, like, you know, Elon Musk and journalists and other people who like wanted to stand up and say things for a lot of people to hear. But I jumped in. It felt like taking a plunge into an icy cold pool. I started sharing my projects and tagging the project leaders. I found a bunch of Tableau visionaries and ambassadors to follow and started seeing what kind of discussions they were having. And it turned out that, like, once I sort of started to get to know the names, it wasn't as overwhelming as it seemed. And if you fast forward to now, some of my closest friends are people that I've met in person once or twice, but I hang out with all the time on Twitter, in the public and in the DMs. So it's all about community. And then, so yeah, there are some of the other projects. These are all ones that I've done at least twice, but I transferred from Millennials in Data being my bi-weekly commitment to myself to Back to Viz Basics. I really liked Back to Viz Basics because one, I got in on the ground floor, so I felt like it was possible to keep up with every single project. Two, they were really narrow topics, and they were really relevant topics, and they were really clean data sets. So I was like, you know, if I'm going to spend half an hour 3 or 4 times, because that's how my process works, I'll open it, look at the data, walk away, think about it, come back, sort of throw something rough together, walk away, think about it, come back, make it prettier, write a headline, walk away, think about it, finalize one more thing, and then tweet it out, let it go. And that brings us to today. So I went from 0 vizzes in September of last year to now I have 35 that are published, and was recently selected to be a Tableau public ambassador. So another important piece about how that happened. So, like, that seems crazy, right? I still think that seems crazy. It's a little surreal to me because since so much of it has taken place virtually, not much has changed about my physical environment. So I'm in the exact same sort of physical and emotional space as I was when I was logging into Millennials in Data from my basement, where where my office is, where I'm presenting to you right now. As you know, like 35 visits later, and like, by the way, if you see the hidden ones, there's like closer to 50. So there are a lot of works in progress that don't make it across the finish line, and that's part of how it goes. So yeah, this is a zoom in on that last year. I joined Tableau Public, started participating in Back to Viz Basics, threw my hat in the ring for Iron Viz. I didn't want to, but I also wanted to. And I was like, there's never going to be a better year to try this for the first time. I've got a solid idea. There's going to be lots of people doing way fancier stuff than me, but I'm just going to go for it, see what happens. And as it turns out, I still use the viz that I built because I built it about the art of cooking and my favorite cookbook. And way down at the bottom of the viz, there's a menu planning widget that makes you a grocery list. So I have no joke pulled up my Iron Viz entry on my phone, standing in the produce aisle at the Trader Joe's. I went to the Tableau conference, which is where I met Kevin Wee in person. And I was talking to a lot of people at that point about like, hey, do you like your job? Do you like your team? Are you hiring? One thing led to another, and now I'm at Discover. I also chatted with Eric at that point. I loved the community of Back to Viz Basics so much, and I missed the feedback aspect from millennials and data. And I had seen that people were putting themselves out there and tweeting out their work and saying feedback welcome, and there would be 0 comments, and that just felt lonely to me. And I was like, you know, I am like, I'm not an anybody, but I have some ideas, and I think that like I can say one thing that's working well and one thing that would be easy to change about that would improve just about any viz. So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go for it. So I started commenting on Back to Viz Basics, and when Eric and I talked at conference, I was like, hey, have you thought about adding a co-leader? And you know, those conversations worked themselves out to the point where we've been running the project together since April. It's been really fun. It's really got into my viz production because I've now focused on figuring out the prompts and finding data that's both easy enough to work with for beginners and interesting enough that, you know, there's still some substance there. I'm really proud that we've gotten a massive run of Viz of the Days out of the prompts that we've released since the conference. All of this publishing and social activity and key conversations led to me hearing about the role at Discover, applying, being accepted, and then as the icing on the top of the cake, got the ambassador nod last month. So super exciting. This is my team. If anyone knows how to make memojis actually look like you, I would love to hear your tips. But now that we have 2 Tableau public ambassadors on the team, we also created a Tableau public page for our team, which is pretty fun, and has also been great in terms of getting to know other members of the data fam and the community. If you spend any time hanging out with the data fam, I'm sure you've heard of some companies that are a little bit sort of buzzier than others. And it's been really fun for me to get to know the folks at Discover. And I tell them all, and the offer is extended to you guys too. If you ever want to venture out into visiting in public, I am here to be your #1 cheerleader. Tag me when you get to Twitter, and I'll give you a warm welcome into the data fam. What I love about being an ambassador is that it gives me a bigger platform to say, hey, look at this cool person. They're doing awesome stuff. Let's give them a high five. So if you guys are also ready to start exploring the world of Tableau Public, you know, when you're ready, it's there. And I saw this tweet the other day from Jeff Plattner, somebody I also bumped into at Tableau conference, and I completely agree with these tips. So it doesn't have to be a course. I like courses, but there's a lot of sort of free or low cost resources out there. Follow the community, take a training, read up, practice, and publish on Tableau Public. When you get to, I let something go when I'm 80% happy with it. So if you wait for perfection, you're never gonna get there. And so if you get to 80%, let it go and move on to the next thing. In my personal vizzing, I am always racing enthusiasm versus completion. So I have a rule that if it's sat for a week, I haven't made any more progress with it, I have to let it go, which has led to some pretty funny things. Like I've got a viz up on my Tableau public profile right now that shows it's still got filler text in it. And you know what? It's always going to have filler text in it because I got what I needed to out of that project. And I'm just never going to go back and write the deep reflective analytic text that I had intended to. Exactly. Done is better than perfect. So other resources I want to point you to if you are also interested. Let me find it. I think I did the whole screen. So here's my whole profile. Like I was talking about earlier, there's 49 visits when you log in, and there's a lot of works in progress. So I anticipate at some point when we take a break between, I think somewhere in the end of the year, we'll have a Viz Basics break. And my thought is I might go back and catch up on all of the prompts that we've released since then. But you can see that, you know, going back, there's a lot of works in progress. There's an Iron Viz work in progress. It's not too late to enter Iron Viz. I'm going in a completely different direction than that work in progress. I'm going to finish it later, but it is not something that was still like sparking joy for my Iron Viz competition. And I'm going to ditch it and go with a simpler story that's a narrower data set and tell one small story well. And the reason why I'm doing that instead of just skipping it for the year, which I also heavily considered, is because it's like, you know, it's like why you do squares for the Super Bowl, right? Like you're not gonna win, and you might or might not even care about the $200 you might make off the betting pool, but it gives you table stakes. And it was really fun to be at conference rooting for the people who are performing on stage last year, knowing that they were the best of the best. And you put your hat in the ring and you gave it a good try, and they put their hat in the ring and gave it an amazing try. So it builds a community. Also, if you're thinking about, you know, like wanting to make connections in the community, everyone who enters Iron Viz, I promise you, stops everything that they're doing the second that they drop that blog that summarizes all of the entries and looks at every single one of them, at least skims past the names and titles. So it's a great way to sort of get yourself out there. I might not have chosen my colors last year, both because it was on theme for the cookbook and the Indianish website, but also because I knew it would stand out in a page full of vizzes that might have white and or black backgrounds. This is the Viz Basics project. Resources to get started. If I was to suggest resources to someone who is just starting to use Tableau, I would say come do the project. You can start at the end, you can start at the beginning, you can cherry pick your way through the prompts. But this is on Eric Balash's Tableau public page. It's the Back to Viz Basics submission tracker. From the homepage, you can see the list of prompts that we've got going on. Really, the best way to learn Tableau is to get your hands dirty. Just work with a whole bunch of different types of data. What I love about the Viz Basics project is that we really start with bar charts, scatter plots, line plots. The tracker acts like a catalog. So if you want to see, like, Sam is a good one. He does them every single week. What did Sam take on this? And then the vast majority of people who are doing Viz Basics, you can download the workbook, pop the hood, see what's going on. So you can take your own spin on things, or you can flip through, see which ones you like, and try to figure out how they did that. The vast majority of the people who do Viz Basics are also on Twitter. So if you get stuck, you can post that you're stuck and tag somebody, and 95% of the time, they're going to reply to your post. They'll be in your DMs. someone will help you figure out what it is that you want to do. Maybe it's linking you to a video, maybe it's walking you through, sending you a screenshot. I was flabbergasted last fall when I was trying to figure out how to do random card selection and ended up chatting directly with one of the Flairlages, who, if you know them, that's another great resource. They have a blog, they do all sorts of crazy stuff in Tableau. And I was like, this person is helping me. And the data fam is just like that. Another thing to do is, this is the best, least hyped Tableau resource. It's called the Data Fam Roundup. I think you can subscribe to it, but it's on the Tableau blog. I'll drop this link into the chat. For those of you who are virtual, and it goes out on Fridays, and it is just a weekly roundup of everything that everyone has put out for the week. So there's always inspiring vizzes, there's events that are coming up, and then there's a list of all of the community projects. So I would say, like, if you have the ability to advocate for some time, my team takes Friday afternoons to do professional development. And that's really fun. I end up mostly giving back to Viz Basics feedback. But you know, if you can advocate within your team for having Friday afternoon as personal time, and then just come to these community projects, browse through the data sets, find a data set that's interesting to you personally, go for it, push yourself out there. Because the other benefit of having this public work that's all stuff that is interesting to me is that I landed with a team who knows me, and it really was a fast forward through the getting to know you phase, because when you put yourself out there, they know what they're getting. So, you know, I feel part of the team much more so than the 2 months that I've been here would usually let you be. And I feel like they knew what they were getting, and that's what they wanted. So as someone who came from being sort of the sole analyst in the what are you doing with Tableau and why are you doing it space, being on a team of people who gets me is fantastic. And I don't think that without Tableau Public that would have been possible. In fact, I know it wouldn't have been possible because it was a full year almost to the day between when I lost having Tableau access for work and when I got it back, installed at Discover, and Tableau Public was that bridge for me. So go forth and viz. If we still have time, I'm happy to take questions. Or if I rambled, I apologize. I wasn't watching the clock. I set a timer and forgot to start it. So really back over to you, Katrina, in the room.
No worries. That was great. I would just like to +1 everything that she said. There were so many good nuggets in there about some of the things I really enjoyed were just, you know, just starting, like just start somewhere. Starting is better than trying to get to perfect. The 80% is better than perfect, just getting it done, getting it out there. And again, we'll +1 all of the resources that she had. Again, trying to iterate the fact of wherever you are, whatever you want to work on, there is a resource out there in Tableau or on the community. But it's one of the things I love about the Tableau community is that it's so like self-resourcing or like self-fulfilling, you know, back to Viz Basics is a really good example of like seeing a need and then, you know, working on it. I'll also iterate the fact that like I learned Tableau through Workout Wednesday. So even if you want to solve technical problems or you want to do data visualization best practices or data storytelling, again, there is anything and everything that you want to work on. There is something out there for you. And I also +1, just starting is going to get you where you want to go. But I saw that there was a couple questions in chat, but I believe you answered a lot of them with your resources. Did anyone in the room have any questions? We also got more food delivered if you want that too. So otherwise, I think anyone in chat, I think all the questions got answered in chat. Anyone like have any other, doesn't have to be a question, anyone have any comments, any, you know, resources that maybe weren't mentioned or that you just want to +1 as well?
glad to hear someone else had that perspective of Twitter.
Yeah, that someone in the room said that they're glad that someone else had that perspective of Twitter. Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with Twitter. Like I totally enjoy, or like I get that that's kind of where you have to go, but sometimes I struggle with like, why would anyone want to listen to me, or what should I put out there? And one of my coworkers said basically like, hey, if you're struggling with it, someone else is probably struggling with it. And even if they aren't struggling with it, the fact that someone else is struggling helps me in my struggle, just to say all of these same things of, yes, I resonate with that. And yes, I want to do that too.
Yeah. Twitter
There-
started out feeling really awkward. But one of the things I did was I went through and I followed all of, especially the social ambassadors and the Tableau public ambassadors. Like once you sort of start to get to know some names and faces, it feels a little bit like less like shouting into a crowded room, and retweet things, find things that you thought were interesting and share them, maybe with a key takeaway. And then you'll just sort of like, and especially if you do a community project, Twitter is like, LinkedIn is maybe where you go to turn in your homework. It's like the posters on a wall at a science conference, right? But Twitter is where everyone is like hanging out around the coffee table, kind of talking about how it went and that kind of thing. So if you do a community project, then you kind of see who else is in there. I recognize some names hanging out in the room on the internet from Twitter, and like you get to know people, you start having sort of side conversations, and then it turns out that they're friends. Like, hi Jessica. Good friend of mine who often shows up when I'm doing TUG Talks. So there's one more question in chat. Where did I get my first Tableau certification? I don't have one. And that's kind of a cool, like, yes, I could sit for the test and I could probably pass one or several of them at this point, but they cost money. It wasn't something that my former employer was interested in paying for, because the only benefit of a certification would have been to me if I were to move to another employer. And then I didn't need one to get my current job because of the strength of my portfolio. I didn't necessarily feel like I had a super strong portfolio. There was just like, at least a full page at that point. But people could see a demonstrated proficiency in the tool. They could learn a little bit about my common style. And so it skipped me past a bunch of screening interviews when I was ready to have those conversations, because I could just send my portfolio to people and be like, hey, I saw you have an opening. This is my portfolio. Do you think there might be a match? And they would be like, oh my God, yes. Or, well, how's your SQL? And let me tell you, my SQL is mediocre. So that kind of was the tipping point in terms of whether those conversations move forward or not. So yeah, no certifications, just work product.
Definitely agree. Again, if whatever your skill set, there is a spot for you in the analytics world.
Definitely.
I think
And
we'll give a, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and it's really fun to watch people on a learning journey. So, like one of the things that I've noticed as someone who pays close attention to Phys Basics is that anyone who does it consistently for any period of time, you see so much growth between their first Phys in the project and their fourth or their fifth. Like, just the practice and the discipline and experimenting with something that you aren't going to have to maintain it forever. You can get it as far as you want and then never think about it again. So it's a really fun playground for creativity and growth.
Yeah, definitely agree. Just for the sake of time, we'll give it another final call on questions, comments, anything else from the room or from chat. All right, well, as she said, feel free to reach out to her if you think of anything else. Again, +1 promoting, talking to people on Twitter. Feel free to reach out to people. They will most likely respond. But Megan, if you want to come on up, we'll hop into our next presentation. Again, thank you very much. We'll give you a silent round of applause. And just gonna
Thank you so
move-
much for having me, and I am excited for the refresher on LODs.
Yeah.
Yeah, will you be sharing your slide deck?
Yes, yes, thank you. Just left the, or I don't need to hook up anything, right? Can we turn? Yeah. We're good? Perfect. All right, so thanks everybody for inviting me here. I know it's kind of the last minute decision, but hopefully, even though you're stuck with me, it'll be something fun. This is the first time I'm presenting in person since before the pandemic, so if I'm a little rusty, bear with me, please. But yeah, we're gonna be going over level of detail crash course today. And just before I get started, I was just wondering if we could do like a show of hands, both to the group online and here, who knows what LODs are? Okay. And see if anybody online is raise their hands. Few people, okay. And who uses them on like a just regular standard biz? Okay, decent amount. Good. Okay, so we're gonna mix the people. Back. All right, so what I'm going to go over today is hopefully kind of everybody will gain something from this, whether you're brand new to them or if you've been using them for a while, hopefully you'll get some new insight. But I am going to kind of keep it more on the, as if you didn't know what they were kind of end of things. So at first, we're going to go over a background on what LODs are. It'd be very example heavy. I like to just demo stuff. So we'll be getting into Tableau and trying some things out. And then we're going to cover some best practices. Hopefully we'll have a lot of time for questions as well. All right, so just a background on LODs. Also, I don't make a presentation without a meme in it, at least one. So a quick shout out to Data Coach. If many of you have come to Tableau user group for Minneapolis in particular in the past, you've probably heard of Data Coach. If you haven't, it's something that your business can partner with to do enablements, basically, learn different tools. And Luke Sankey actually has a really good course on Data Coach for advanced calculations, which dives really deep into LODs. It's where I learned a lot of this material. I kind of picked it up maybe before I started phData, but this really solidified it for me. And he also, in that same course, talks about table calcs, which I won't be touching, but you can, go look into that if you like. All right, so before we get into LODs, I wanted to really center our knowledge on one of the fundamentals of Tableau, which is how is Tableau treating data, and particularly with aggregations. So we all know Tableau has two different field types. There's measures, there's dimensions. Well, for measures, Tableau will always try to aggregate at the highest level. So here I have an example of bringing sum of sales onto the viz just from, Superstore data. It automatically sums that to the highest. So for the entire data set, there's no filters on this. It's 2.3 million. Whereas dimensions will always try to separate data down to the lowest level possible. So then I brought in segment to our sum of sales. You can see how that separates across the different types of segments that we have. So why is this important? It's because we can bypass these defaults that Tableau uses for aggregation to a precise level that we defined using level of detail expressions, or LODs. Probably use those two terms interchangeably throughout this talk. All right, so then first of all, before we get into them, we need to really understand the syntax to be able to know how to use it. Curly brackets are how people recognize, okay, yeah, this is an LOD. Some of these aspects, by the way, that you see here will always show up in an LOD, and some will show up just sometimes. What I mean by that is you can see in the examples over here, take this first one, we do have the curly brackets, we have a function specified at the beginning, and we have one or two, could have several dimensions, comma separated. And then this colon that separates what's on the left-hand side from what's on the right-hand side. And that right-hand side, you'll always have some kind of aggregate measure inside the curly brackets there. And so there's a few different ways you can look at this. I personally, and Katrina's actually brought this up to me, like you can always say it in a sentence to try and understand what's going on here. So if you take that first example, you really just read that as, what is the sum of sales for each combination of category and subcategory? That's kind of like how I would read or interpret the syntax to a LOD. And you can see sometimes that might be more complicated, like when you get towards that last example, there's an if statement in there, it gets a little bit more hairy, but kind of pausing and thinking about it in English, like what's going on sometimes. All right, so before going on, it's important to note Tableau's order of operations. You've probably seen this chart or a similar one like it. I certainly don't have it memorized, but it's good to note that things like extract filters, data source filters, and context filters are all happening before an LOD. And in particularly these different types of LODs. So I put them in here just so you can kind of see like where these are happening. Personally, I like to think of like context filters as a way to get around an LOD if I want to just make it a little bit easier for myself. And we'll kind of talk about that more later. All right, so let me get into types of LODs. There's really 4 types going on here. That first one, global, is sort of what I was saying before, where you don't have to have much in your expression, you really just have the curly brackets around an aggregate measure. And what that's really meaning is it's rolling up to the entire data set. And I won't keep repeating this, but with respect to Tableau's order of operations. So when I say like entire data set, obviously, if you have some of those filters on, it's going to take that into account first. Again, there's no function call out in there. There's no like fixed or exclude or include statements. And there's no colon, there's no dimensions that you're pulling out. And what's it good for? It's good for getting like often mins and maxes or grand totals. The one thing that I always like to use it for is max of some date. So this is great if you're, if you have a data set where you're trying to reference something like recent, but you might not have data through today, so you can't use the today function. Well, you can use max order date and the level of detail to kind of get that for you. So the second one is fixed. Now this is my personal favorite. It's the one I probably use like 99.9% of the time. And how you interpret a fixed LOD is really whatever dimensions you put in there, that's what it's specifying that to be fixed at. It's ignoring all of the other dimensions that may or may not be in your view. And it's just doing the exact ones that you specify. And again, this is good for pretty much about any LOD you'll need to write. Technically, you can even write the global ones in this way. If you're just that type of person that likes to, always do something in a certain way, you can just write fixed, no dimensions there, and then after it. Now, exclude and include, I won't talk about too much in this talk, just because they're very rare in which they're useful, I found. Like if you ask anybody who uses Tableau all the time or is really comfortable with level of detail expressions, they'll probably tell you they never use these, or it's like less than 1% of the time. But I did want to call them out on the slide just so you can kind of get an idea of what they might be used for. So exclude, I found it's useful in hierarchies in particular. So this is like I put state in this example. If you had a set of geographic data and you wanted to ignore that state, but maybe you're considering city and region or something, this is when it might be useful. And similarly with include, this one is good for, I found like when you're wanting to deal with unweighted averages, it might be something good there. But I will say that most of the time, really most of the time, if you're trying to use one of these, you could probably do it with a fixed expression. All right, so we could jump into some examples, and I'm going to open up Tableau. All right, you guys will see it fuzzy. Just let me know if it's a problem. So what I did here is I connected to the sample superstore data. We have, like if you use that at all, you're probably familiar with some of the things in there. We have category, subcategory, years going across the top. And then we have the sum of sales on the inside here. So let's start to think about what we can do with LODs. The first thing I wanted to do was
what if we wanted to take this exact view and get the global sum of sales? So basically ignore category, ignore subcategory, ignore that year, just give me the total for that entire group. So how do we do this? Let's go to make a calculated fields. And we can think about this, remember, in terms of our global syntax. So we don't need to have fixed or anything, but we do need curly brackets. And we need some aggregate measure. So in this case, we just did sum of sales. It's basically saying, give me the sum of sales for the entire data set. So I'm going to call this sales global. All right, and let's find that and bring that onto our view. So what will we, before I do that, quick question, what do you expect to happen when I bring that onto that view, replacing the current sum of sales? Yep, same number everywhere. Let's see if we get that. Sure enough, we do. So again, you might say, oh, that's great, but why is that useful? Obviously, it's not something you'd want to continue on with this view in particular, but it's great to know that we can isolate that total. So then when we do want to use it, we can compare it to a row level metric. So that's kind of the more basic example. What if we want to make it a little bit harder? And we have in here, you know, say we want to group by or find every combination of category and year. So I kind of have these 12 distinct boxes. And so really what you think about should be happening is we'll have 12 distinct numbers for each of those sections, right? So let's try to do that expression. So this one, I'm going to go ahead and do fixed. If you just start typing fixed, it'll automatically add that curly bracket. And what we're thinking about doing here is we're going to find every combination of category and year. So you can actually put those as your dimensions, comma separated. You can do a function here. So I'm going to do the year function for order date. Do my colon, so that ends that left-hand side of the expression. And then the right-hand side, my aggregate measure is still sum of sales. And then we're going to finish it off with another curly bracket. So this we can call sales by category and year. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring that one on. And let's go back to our sort of test here, see if we got the same number in every box. Looks like we did. I'll talk a little bit more about validation towards the end of the talk, but in general, this does look right to me. And just for the fun of it, I know I said we wouldn't do too much about exclude, but let's think about this one because the fixed expression is grabbing category and year and saying, I want just those things. Well, in essence, that's excluding subcategory here, right? So let's see what would happen if we wrote that as an exclude statement. So if we write exclude subcategory, sum of sales, and let's see in a parenthesis. So we'll call it sales, exclude subcat. We should be able to get the same value by dragging this. Sure enough, we do. It looks like it didn't change. MM actually brought that new one on there. So now that we know these two things are equal, which one's better? Like which one should we use? Then we have some ideas about what they would prefer to use for this type of scenario. Anybody online maybe? Let me see, open up the chat.
Depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, it does depend on what you want to do. Yeah. Can you elaborate more on that?
Compared to the that's some of all the years, and you use it on just brackets. Just compare with specific years, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it really makes sense to think about what you're going to compare it to. Like, is it going to be the same as like the dimensions and things that are in this view, or do we truly want to have just, category and year grouped by that? Yeah, so another person said they might be confused using one or the other. Totally agree. I think the one thing that I found in particular is like, if I want a calculated field that I made same across any view, regardless of which dimensions I have in there. Well, exclude might act differently, you know, if I was going to use that in a different. Was there a question or a comment?
Yeah, I was gonna say, look, kind of back to, depends what you want to do with it. I think it matters, like, to your order of operations visual before, like, if you're going to filter data, right? I mean, I know you can use a context filter to sort of push where the fixed calculation happens. But,
Yep.
you know, in your example, it's like, if you wanted to see, you know, the categories by state, right? And you want to be the user to be able to toggle through the states on the filter, you either have to put that as a context filter if you're going to use a fixed LOD, right? Or you have to use the exclude method that you just did so that it responds to the filter that's on the page. Like, that to me is where I tend to draw the line, is what do I want to do? What do I want the user to be able to do with the data? And then, you know, sort of how complex is that filtering stack?
That's an excellent point. So like if we had dimension filters on there, do we want that to affect the viz or not? Do we want that to affect the LOD or not? If the answer is yes, you know, then we might want to go for the exclude. If it's no, we might want to stay with fixed. So excellent point. I'm glad that you picked up on that.
There's one more. Emily has her hand up as a question here. And so, Emily, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, or are you going to type it in chat?
Yeah, if it's okay if I can ask my question over the computer. So we just talked about how the fixed function essentially includes category and year, and it's roughly equivalent to excluding subcategory. I'm thinking about the include function though, and if include and exclude are opposites, right? Just in the English language, they're opposites. So I would think that the opposite of excluding subcategory would be including category and order date. But
well, you know,
that's the fixed function. So what's the include function?
So, well, let's just try it. Let's see what happens here. It could be that for this example, it's a little too basic to be able to like pick up on the nuance and difference between include and fixed. Category, year, order date. Do sales, food. Let's see what that one does. Okay, so yeah, you're right in the sense that you would expect it to maybe be the opposite of what that exclude is doing. But in this case, we're getting very different results. It looks like these are maybe just the individual ones. But if we go back and look at the definition of like what includes doing, it's basically just using it whether or not it's on the view. So this is, I kind of like to think about this as it's still going to follow what Tableau's defaults are going to do. But if something wasn't on that view, it will include it. It's a way to include something if it's not there, but it still does respect what's going on with like Tableau's fundamental levels of aggregation, if that makes sense.
Okay.
If I remove like category, you mean? Yep. Interesting. Because that one I had category and year, right?
Maybe adding up what's there, you know, from that category. You remove the other dimension.
Remove which one? Sorry.
So it might be adding up that calculation for that subcategory into the furniture as a total.
That's a good point. Or let me see what the regular single sales is. Okay, it is the same. So yeah, I mean, I guess this is one where I would definitely want to play around with it a lot before, you know, I would basically productionalize it and make sure I really know what's going on and test it. That's one thing with exclude and include, or really any LOD, is that you want to test it with different filters, different, you know, views, and make sure it's actually matching what you want it to be. But Yeah, that one, it's a little bit tricky, to be honest. But yeah, good questions. So let's go on to the next one, because I just want, for the sake of time, I want to keep going. So now that we have kind of a general concept of how to isolate those different values by, different dimensions within our data, we want to compare that to something, right? We want to actually do a comparison to be able to utilize that. So in this case, I have, kind of the same thing. I'm taking away year though. And let's say we wanted to compare the value of every subcategory in here to just a single value of one of the subcategories. So in this case, we look at art. Let's say we want that one to be compared to each other one. And so like what that would kind of look like, what we hope we're going for here is we want to isolate just art, and then we want to make a calculation to compare the two. So how would we do that? So I showed it in the previous slide, but or it kind of hinted at it in the previous slide, but for this one, I'd start with a fixed, even though this could really be kind of like a global one, because I'm not going to add any dimensions there. So I'm going to start with fixed and make this bigger. And if you think about this, what we're really trying to do is we're saying if subcategory is art, then give me the sum sales, else nothing, right? So you might think that you just want to write that out like this: if subcategory is equal to art, then give me the sum sales net. And if we wanted to end that syntax, of course we get an error here because Tableau is saying we can't mix aggregate and non-aggregate, right? So this is probably where a lot of people got stuck. I know when I was first learning it, it was really difficult for me to understand this concept. But if you think about, what's going on here, think about just the if expression. What we're doing is looking at each individual row and saying, is this row art? If so, keep it, right? And then do that for every single record. And then we sum that set where it does equal art. So if you think about this sum is actually going around the if statement. So we're like first grabbing all of our art subcategories, and then we're going to sum those sales. And now it's in the format that Tableau likes. We have a aggregate measure there on that right-hand side. So we should be good. Let me just go ahead and give this a name. Okay. So let's go ahead and bring this in the view. Sure enough, we do have a match there. Sorry if this is hard to see. If we go back here, it looks like we did get what we wanted there. Now art going across. So now we can make a comparison. So we can literally just create another calculated field to subtract the two. This is also something that's maybe hard to stumble over because if you think about, okay, well, do I subtract sales minus sales art or the sum of sales minus the sum of sales art? Well, let's look at the sales art one quick. Now we have this on the view, it is a sum, but if we made this say like a min or an average or a max, it's going to be the same regardless because it's already doing an aggregation just at the level that we specified. So you can treat it like it is an aggregate even though you have to add yet another aggregate around it. So when we do this calculation, what we want is the sum of sales subtracting, and again, you can do sum or min, whatever makes sense. I think min might be more performant slightly, maybe not, I don't know. And so this one we'll just call like difference. Okay, and then we can bring that on here. And it does look like we have correct. So that this, is our 0. Directionally looks correct. Oops, one. Go back here. It looks like we have what we wanted. If you wanted to make this smarter, you certainly could. You could, go back and look at this sales art option, and maybe we want to make this a parameter, right? So you can go and add a parameter. We'll call this subcat. We'll make it a string. Make it list, and we can add all the values that are already there for subcategory. Click OK, and then we can just change this in our field to be subcat, our parameter. Okay, and then you can see the numbers have changed here. If we go ahead and bring that parameter on the view, So right now it's for accessory. So like we can change that to anything else and it updates that data for us. It makes our comparison a lot more meaningful. We can imagine an end user exploring this better and, you know, having a better experience. All right, so one more thing here. So this is great, you know, if we wanted to compare one against another, but what if we kind of wanted to get an idea about how a single subcategory does against the totals average, right? That's a little bit of a harder concept to think about, but we have the same kind of thing. So what we first want to do is try and figure out that group's average. So I'm going to try to walk through this as if I didn't already know the answer, which is like, what are the ideas we want to get out of the way first? So we know we need to fix a level detail expression. What if we wanted to do just average of sales? So you might think, that doesn't seem quite right, but I just kind of want to see what I get as an answer. So let's go ahead and bring that on the view. Sure enough, feels wrong, looks wrong, right? So what that one's actually doing is it's taken at the row level. So it's calculating, you know, what the true row level, maybe these are all transactions or something. So it's like your average transaction will be much lower than it would be here. So let's think about this another way. Let me go and reopen that. Okay, so one thing you could do is you might say, what I really want to do is I want the sum of everything, but I just want to divide it by the number of records I have here, which is like essentially the number of subcategories, right? So we might change this average to a sum. And we might, you know, then divide by the distinct count of subcategory. So if we apply that, of course, it's going to give me an error because it was not aggregate. Now it is. Actually, I think I just forgot something. Oh, right. So this needs to be, because the right hand or the denominators and aggregates, this one needs to be also. Let's try that and bring that back on. Okay, so why did that work? You know, we divided by the count distinct of subcategory. Well, if you think about this one and what we had in here, this count distinct is not a level of detail expression, right? So this is going to be doing at the row level. So in this case, when it's encountering it here, it's taking the sum for each record here divided by the number of, you know, distinct subcategories. In this row, it's just one. So it's essentially dividing by one each time. So what we also want to do is, you know, make this one a level of detail expression. We can just add those curly brackets around it. We have to make it aggregate also. Again, in this case, the aggregations I'm doing are not really important. What's on the outside, and you'll probably get a feel for that as you experience more of, you know, writing LODs. But in this case, this looks a lot more correct, right? So we have the distinct number of, or sorry, the sum of sales for this entire group divided by the distinct number of subcategories. And, you know, there's one other way that I would see you to maybe think about that problem. So like if we wanted to do it the same thing in another way, you might do, if you think about like getting the unique sum of each category and subcategory, and then taking the average of that. So essentially recreating this first with an LOD, and then taking that average. So what would that look like? We have fixed, and so we might do category, subcategory, sum of sales. And if we just want to test that before we make it more complicated, I'm just going to do sales average 2. So let's test that here. What I would want is, yep, the same values here. And then we want to try and take an average of that. So if we think about that, we're taking sort of a global average of this set of numbers. All right, so let me open that back up. And this is getting to something quite complicated or complex for Tableau, and I won't take it any harder than this, hopefully, in this talk, but we're doing actually a nested LOD here. So we're doing, on the outside, it's going to be an average. Oops. There we go. An average of this LOD. We're going to just end that with these wrappers. And sure enough, we have the same one. So definitely most things you'll encounter in Tableau, there's more than one way to do something, right? So in this case, we found two. I'm gonna bring that second one off, and just to finish this off, we're going to calculate that difference. Go ahead and make a new calculated field. And we might just do sum of sales, subtracting our sales average, which should already be aggregate. It is, so difference, average. Bring that on. And there, it looks good. All right, so this is kind of like getting to the idea of how do we take these numbers and actually put them in something meaningful by comparing them to row level numbers. Okay. All right, so that pretty much covers like the main examples of creating LODs. Then for the next part, talking about best practices, I'll first show the slide and then we can jump back into Tableau. Here. By the way, on the slides, I do have the examples that I went over sort of written out in slide format, so hopefully that would be helpful. So for best practices, the biggest thing I wanted to highlight was how do you validate LODs? Because I forgot your name, sir, but your point about, I don't understand what it's doing. I don't know what Tableau's doing, and I can't really tell. There's a lot of frustration around that, and I feel that as well. It's still in my day-to-day of using Tableau, but there's some tricks here that you can hopefully incorporate to help make it a little bit easier. So when Tableau is giving me this number, do I know why? Do I know if that's correct? So I have some different, ways here that you can make it easier. When you're talking about LODs, the first one, is what should the value be? Do you know? Because like sometimes I literally will manually do it on a calculator just to make sure I know what that value should be. And then when I, I'm actually doing my LOD, I have something to compare it to. If you are doing something more complicated, like something with a rate, like a numerator and a denominator, maybe separate those. Do one in the calculated field first, check it, do the other one, check it, and then divide them. Or same thing with that nested one we just did. Try them each individually before you go for the whole shebang. The biggest thing that I do is I use a non-LOD visualization to compare it to my LOD. And in fact, before I go on, let me just go over that example. So if we go back to this one, I think, let me actually bring on our solution, which I think was maybe this one, or no, I think it was, we can use the exclude one. Right, so this one was that answer that we got to try and get it by year and by category. So how do we know what the answer should be? Well, I have a table here where I basically just have the same viz, but I don't have subcategory on there, right? So it's kind of doing the summation that we expect, and we can compare that here. Let me just bring that one on. We can literally just put these side by side, say, this 157, we are getting that there. 170, we're getting that there. So like compared to a viz that's not using an LOD that you have more confidence in that it's correct, right? So that's by far the biggest recommendation that I have for validation. But if we go on to a couple more, so using color or shape sometimes is like a really quick way to be able to tell you if something's right or not. I have an example we can go over on that one. And then just also testing, this isn't so much about validation, but like testing if it works for different filters that you may or may not be using. So if you have a handful of filters that your end user can play with, try testing those out, make sure that it still works the way you expect it to. And then lastly, you don't have to make sure that everything's right within Tableau. You can take it outside, you can go to Excel. I personally use Alteryx, or like you can use another tool of your choice to confirm that that's right. And similarly with if statements, they can be really hard to validate. So I just urge you to think about these in terms of the statements themselves. So like the first outcome of this if statement, what should the answer be? Go through each one. If you're doing an if statement and you want to kind of test where within that if statement each record is falling, I would try to make the outcomes of those unique. So sometimes in here, I'll literally say after my then, then A, then B, then C, just to make sure I know which one is the one that's triggering it for that record, right? And keep in mind that the order of operations here does matter, right? Top to bottom. So if something applies to both statement 1 and statement 3, statement 1 is going to claim it, right? So let me go over some of those other examples real quick. I think it was here. Oh, this is a caution. Yeah. Okay. So for this color shape one, the one thing I wanted to highlight was, so if we, in this case, we have like this function, or sorry, this calculated field. It's trying to find that min and max order date, but by each category, right? So if you wanted to be sure if this was working, you might say, okay, well, this is working. It looks like it's working for each category. But what if we didn't have category on the bins? How does it still act, right? So it does look like there is a different max for each category. That color really indicates that to us right away. It's pretty helpful. And, you know, when you're here, you can see, you know, this one's 12/18, 12/20, 12/19. Sure enough, they're all different days, right? So it's just kind of that quick visual cue. And then also, if you're passing out the workbook to somebody else, you can document this and say, this is how to prove that this is right? They don't have to question your LODs. Okay, and then, so the other best practices that I wanted to talk about real quick. This is a little bit more advanced, but definitely something I've encountered in my work, which is like star schema table. So if you do not have power over your own data sources, you might just be handed them from somebody else. Sometimes, you know, what makes sense in more of a data engineering standpoint doesn't always make sense in a Tableau standpoint. And so a star table is one of those things. It's where you kind of take a schema similar to this one, and you just stack it all into one big table. It leads to a lot of duplications across, you know, different data points within there. And so this may make it necessary to do LODs for even your most basic calculations. One example I have in here. So if you ever use Salesforce data, you might be familiar with like Salesforce cases. In this case, I was using a star table that had a bunch of other stuff just like joined in and onto that. And so this one case, it had the survey data that came from that case also joined in. And so you can see in the viz here, if I had brought in just a regular sum of each of my different survey scores, it becomes nonsensical, like 370, that's a nonsense score. It's from 1 to 5. But when doing the LOD, you can see I do have the correct score. So just a lookout for that, you know, if you're not creating your own data sources. The next thing is to be sort of wary of using LODs, or just be careful in grand totals. So you can see we have 2 different grand totals here, despite having the same columns. Essentially what one is doing is at the row level, it's calculating the average, so more of like a weighted average, and the other one is unweighted. So it's basically taking an average of these averages. So, you know, there might be instances for either. Just make sure you know which one you want, which one you think you're displaying is what you're actually displaying. All right, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about was just when not to use LODs. There's just only a few instances in Tableau where you really can't. In this case, it's in combination with table calculations or the ATTR function. You'll get this error that's shown up on the screen. And then there's been some like nuance things that you probably won't experience, but if you do, this may be wise. Like, you know, if you search on Tableau like about LODs, it'll talk about that reference to floating point measures that's a little bit problematic. I personally haven't encountered it. I don't even have an example that, you know, I could show, but it still might be something that acts a little bit weird. And then LODs do not show up on your data source page. You may have noticed that. You're like, why is this null or blank across the board? Personally, I like that because it tells me, you know, there's more complexity. There's usually not just one value that can be. It might depend on what your view looks like, right? And then I just to add on there, include and exclude must always be measures, whereas fixed can be also dimension. Okay, so that was all I had. It's all about the level of details. So any questions for me about any of this, or yeah, just anything?
How are you
Yeah. I just hold, you just hold control and you scroll. Control and scroll. Or Mac, I suppose it's command, yeah. When you're doing, sorry, what? Ooh, a data blend. I don't know. Do you know, Katrina?
I would put it in, be very careful.
I know. Well, I personally like data blends have a problem with count distinct, and that's if that's something you're using in your LOD, it would still be a problem. I think I have encountered some extra problems with blending, but might I suggest just use data relationships, which are basically the improved version of doing a data blend. Have you used data relationships? Oh, okay. Well, yeah, with relationships, it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, yeah, sorry, it's like the terminology of Tableau. They still do have this thing called data blending, which is different than a relationship. Good question, though. Any other questions? Let me check the chat. Oh, how do we get all the slides? I think you will know that, right?
Yeah, so we put the recording or link to the recording on the Minneapolis or the Twin Cities LinkedIn Tableau group. So if you're not a member, it's free to join. Just go Google or like search for in LinkedIn and check it out there. And so the recording will get sent to from Tableau, and it's like a YouTube link, and then we'll attach the slides as well. Were there any other questions?
It's like Derek had a call out that you might have to add, if you're adding more dimensions to your view, you might also have to add it to your fixed calculation. That's true, depending on how you want your fix treated, like that calculation treated, you may need to go and add it there. Or like if it's on your filters, I get around that sometimes by just making it a context filter. So I don't have to change my LOD. But yeah, good points. Okay, I think that was it. I think we addressed the rest.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Right, I will bring this one back. And again, I will just echo some of the stuff we were talking about before as far as like practicing. This is a really good thing to practice. And like Workout Wednesday and all of those initiatives that we talked about before are really good ways to practice these technical problems. They are a controlled environment. Your boss is not looking over your shoulder and being like, I need this done right now. And so you can kind of figure it out. You can break it as much as you want and your job won't be at risk. So it's a really good opportunity. And again, they start exposing you to like those community initiatives. They expose you to these problems, to these scenarios, kind of those edge cases things. Like example would be, I don't do a lot of geographic data. And so all of my geographic data or like knowledge in Tableau comes from Workout Wednesdays, Makeover Mondays, those sorts of things. So definitely get an opportunity to kind of flex different muscles. So I know we are a little bit over, but thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you to everyone who came and attended in person as well as online. I'll give a final call out if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, anything that they want to call out. Maybe some more events coming up, whether online or in person, or just a general wish for being well in the Tableau community. So last call for anyone. All right, we'll call it again. Thank you so much to everyone who came online, and we will end the meeting. Have a good evening.